Hey everyone, welcome to Ada Bible Church. I'm so glad that you're with us here this weekend. If we haven't met yet, my name is Brad and I'm one of the pastors for our young adult ministry. Hey, I don't know about you, but it felt like God flipped the switch this week. We went from summer to winter overnight and I just totally was not ready for that. I was not prepared for that at all. Hey, well, today I am hanging out with a legend, the one and only Luke Koskinen. Luke heads up our middle school and high school ministry that we call Lifeline. And Luke, I have two middle school boys and they absolutely love Lifeline and they love you.
Well, thank you, Brad. I am so grateful for the job that I have in leading such an amazing team who loves students and loves being with students and leading our leaders as well.
Awesome. What do you have going on this year in Lifeline?
Yeah, so right now I am excited for the fact that our students are serving. A couple weeks ago, our middle school and our high school students came to our campuses with gifts, with toys, with hygiene items, and they packed those gifts into shoe boxes in partnership with Operation Christmas Child. Now, those shoe boxes are going to go all around the world to children in orphanages and in villages everywhere. And those toys are going to represent the fact that God sees those children and he loves them so much. And so I just need to take a second and say, if you are a student and you participated in that, thank you. If you're a leader who helped your kids put together a box or wrap a box, thank you. And if you're a parent who probably did some of the purchasing, thank you as well. And if you are a middle school or high school student, or you have middle school and high school students in your home, we invite you to be a part of the Lifeline community. It is a great time.
Luke, thank you for all of the energy that you pour into Lifeline. And having two middle school students at home, I know it must be a lot of energy because I can't imagine a whole church full of that. So thank you for what you do. And speaking of thank you, I just want to say thank you to you as well. Last week, we talked about our giving tables. These are tables at each of our campuses where we partner with organizations who are helping to meet the needs of people right here in Grand Rapids. And you dropped off items that are going to those people. And I hope that you know that it's so much more than a warm coat or a stroller or some soap. These are going into the hands of people in need. And so I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being the church and just loving our city so well. In fact, one of the last teachings that Jesus does is with his disciples. And he knows that he's not going to be with them for very much longer. And so he gathers them together and he teaches them this last bit of important information. And Jesus, the creator of the universe, he grabs a towel and he grabs a bowl of water and he gets down on his hands and his knees and he begins to wash the dirt and the mud and the grime off of his disciples' feet. And when he's done, he stands and he tells them, I have been an example for you, but now it's your turn. Go out and show the love of Jesus to other people as you've experienced it from me. And so I just want to encourage you, keep going, keep showing the heart of Jesus to our city. Hey, and if you want in on this, you can head to our digital bulletin at adabible.info and you can click on the tab that says Giving Tables. You'll see a list of our campuses and organizations and items that they have in need. You can buy an item or two and drop it off during a weekend service or Monday through Thursday from 9 to noon. You'll also see a tab where you can leave a financial gift. I just want to say it again. Thank you. Thank you for sharing what you have so that we can be a church who loves our city so well. At this point in the service, Andy and McKenna are going to lead us through a time of worship.
health and salvation. O ye who hear, now to his temple draw near. Join me in glad adoration. Oh, we praise you, Lord. Praise to the Lord who doth prosper thy work and defend thee. Surely his goodness and mercy he daily attend thee. Ponder anew what the Almighty can do, if with his love he befriend thee. Praise to the Lord, oh let all that is in me adore him. Yes, all that has life and breath come now with praises before him. And let the Amen sound from his people again. Let me forever adore him. Let the Amen sound from his people again. Let me forever adore him. We adore you,
We're reaching out to welcome you, God, and fill this place again with your song, and flood our thoughts with wonder and awe, and give us some great glimpse of a never-changing God. Until all we want and all we need is found in you, is found in you. Jesus, every victory is found in you, is found in you. Open wide our hearts now to yours, and every fear bow down to your love. We would see like never before, and give us a greater glimpse of a never-changing God. Cause all we want and all we need is found in you, is found in you. Jesus, every victory is found in you, is found in you. And in your presence there is freedom, and in your presence we are made whole. In your presence there is freedom. Jesus, in your presence we are made whole. 'Cause all we want and all we need is found in you. is found in you, Jesus. Every victory is found in you, is found in you. All we want and all we need is found in you, is found in you, Jesus. Every victory is found in you, is found in you. Big, beautiful statement that God is all we want, God is all we need. And often when we gather to worship, a lot of the songs we sing have these big statements, and it's always an invitation for me to also ask the big questions. Do I really believe that? Because honestly, there's some days where I come in and I'm just so full of God's goodness and have seen so much of His faithfulness that I just want to celebrate. God, you're all I want. God, you're all I need. There's other days where I get distracted and I forget about God's goodness. And I ask the question, is He really all that I need? And the beautiful thing about our God is I believe that He allows us to come with those questions over and over again. And our God will always remind us He is, in fact, so good. And I believe that the very world we live in, every moment that we are awake, is a reminder of God's goodness. So today we get a chance to read from the Psalms, this beautiful old poem that talks about the world we live in and how every sunrise is an example of God's goodness, how every field is just full of His beauty and His provision. So would you join me as we read together today? We read, "The whole earth is filled with awe at your wonders. Where morning dawns, where evening fades, you call forth songs of joy. You care for the land and water it. You enrich it abundantly. The streams of God are filled with water to provide the people with grain, for so you have ordained it. You drench its furrows and level its ridges. You soften it with showers and bless its crops. You crown the year with your bounty, and your carts overflow with abundance. The grasslands of the wilderness overflow. The hills are clothed with gladness, and the meadows are covered with flocks. The valleys are mantled with grain, and they shout for joy. And they sing."
This is my Father's world, and to my listening ears, all nature sings and round me rings the music of the spheres. This is my Father's world. I rest me in the thought of rocks and trees, of skies and seas. His hand the wonders wrought. This is my Father's world. Oh, let me not forget that though the wrong seems oft so strong, God is the ruler yet. This is my Father's world. The battle is not done. Jesus who died will dry or storm-filled skies, my God is present there. This is my Father's world. Why should my heart be sad? The Lord is King, let the heavens ring. He reigns, let the earth be glad. Oh, this is my Father's world. Why should my heart be sad? The Lord is King, let the heavens ring. He reigns, let the earth be glad. The Lord is King, let the heavens ring. He reigns, let the earth be glad.
So God, today we come to you, surrounded by a world that declares your goodness, and we join in and we say, you are indeed good. We recognize you as King, as sovereign over all things, and we place ourselves under that. We say that you are the King of us as well, and so today continue your work, continue your goodness in our lives. We ask these things in your good name. Amen.
All right, how we doing? Oh, it's good to see you. Glad to be here today. And welcome to those of you joining us from our campuses and Ada Bible online as well. If we haven't met, my name is Aaron. I'm one of the teaching pastors here. And before we get too far today, I got to let you know what's coming next weekend. I'm very excited. Our friend John Dixon filmed a sermon for us in his hometown in Australia. And so next weekend, he's going to be teaching on one of the most pivotal passages in understanding the gospel of Mark, and so I hope you're able to join us next weekend for that. But today, I want to start out by bringing you back to your days in school. Now, for some of you, this was like last week, but others of you, decades ago, right? Now, I just want to imagine it's a Monday morning. You're walking into school, you make your way to your first hour math class, you sit down, and the teacher is handing out pieces of paper, and it doesn't take you long to realize, oh, this is a test. And some of you are getting this memory of this anxiety, right? Even though it was decades ago. Oh, this is a test, and this is a test I'm not ready for because I forgot, I didn't study. And so there you are, you can't run away, you have to take the test. And even as you're filling out the answers, you're like, this is bad. This is not going well. And so next day, you get the test back, and there's this letter on the test, and it's red, and it's an F because you bombed the test. You weren't ready, and you failed it. But then you hear those glorious words from the teacher. Don't worry, there will be a retest. Praise Jesus, a shot at redemption. Does anybody remember this, right? All these years ago or last week, whatever it was. So the reason I bring this up is because today, in the story we're going to be looking at in Mark's gospel, the disciples, Jesus' 12 followers, they're going to get a shot at a retest. Now, you might be thinking, well, okay, what's the test that they failed? The test that they failed was seeing Jesus clearly, understanding who Jesus is and why he came. And just understand, this is kind of a big deal. I mean, the central question in Mark's gospel is, who is Jesus? And these guys have been journeying with him in person 24 hours a day for quite a long time, and they're kind of missing it. They're not getting it. They're failing the test. But today, Jesus, the master teacher, is going to take them to school on who he is. And the question for us, the question for you is, are you seeing Jesus clearly? Is it possible that there's something about Jesus that you're missing? And maybe this is your first time tuning into church or attending church in a long time, or you're kind of just in a weird place with your faith right now, and so you would go, yeah, probably, probably not seeing Jesus all that clearly. And others of us would go, I've been in church for years. I mean, I don't remember life without church. That's how far it goes back. And so I've heard all these stories. I know the Bible pretty well, so I feel like I'm seeing Jesus pretty clearly. Well, I just want to remind you, nudge you a little bit, that the disciples were physically with Jesus, walking with him day after day after day, and they were missing some pretty important stuff. And so it's possible that you and I, even though we have been around church all of our lives, there might be an aspect of Jesus that we're not seeing clearly. And I think this is important, because when you don't see Jesus clearly, you miss who he is, what he's doing in the world, and what our role is in that. And so I just want to challenge you to do something as we begin our time today, and that's just to pray a simple prayer. Jesus, open my eyes. Jesus, open my eyes to who you are and what it is you desire to do in me and through me. And so where we're headed today is Jesus is going to take his disciples to school on who he is, a three-part conversation. Part one, I'm just calling the retest. Now, if you have your journal with you, which I hope you do, we're on page 67, and I'm going to begin in verse 1 of chapter 8. So a map as we get started here. Where we left Jesus last week and his disciples was a city up north, not in Israel, by the way, a city called Tyre. And so Jesus spent some time there. Now he travels back down through Galilee, which is the region where he grew up and does most of his ministry, heads across the Sea of Galilee to this region over here called the Decapolis, which in Greek means the 10 cities. So just understand, this is not a Jewish area, and the Decapolis also not a Jewish area, and that's just important for the context of our story today. So here's how Mark tells the story. During those days, another large crowd gathered. He's already pointing us back to something that happened previously. And since they had nothing to eat, this large crowd, Jesus called his disciples to him, and he said, I have compassion for these people. They have already been with me for 3 days and have had nothing to eat. That's a long sermon. And I bet they're hungry, okay? Verse 3, if I send them home hungry, they're going to collapse on the way because some of them have come a long distance. Now, question, does this sound familiar? Those of you who have been traveling through this series with us, this story probably sounds very similar to another story that happened in chapter 6 of Mark's gospel. In fact, the two stories are so similar. I'm just going to show you in a little chart here how similar the details are. So you got Mark 6 and then the story we're looking at today in Mark 8. Both of these stories, there's a large crowd that's gathered around. Jesus has compassion on those people, and so he begins to teach them. They get hungry, and there's not enough food. In both examples, they're out in the middle of nowhere. Now, in this story, if you remember, the disciples are like, Jesus, there's not enough food here. You've been teaching. We got to send these people home, or they're gonna starve. And Jesus goes, well, you feed them. And the disciples are like, don't be crazy. There's no food out here. And then if you remember the story, they gather what food there is, just a couple loaves and a couple fish. Jesus asks the disciples to sit the people down. Jesus does this miracle of multiplication. The disciples distribute the food out to the crowds. This story is called the feeding of the 5,000. Now, I think this was a test. The disciples were supposed to understand what Jesus could do in that moment because they'd been traveling with him. They had seen his miracles. They'd heard him teach, but they failed that test. Jesus is like, you feed him, and they're like, don't be crazy. No. But this moment here in Mark 8 is like the retest. It's like Jesus sets up the same scenario. He's asking the same questions, and the disciples are supposed to go, we know this one. We know what you're going to do, Jesus. Peter, go find a kid with a lunch. Jesus is going to do that thing with the bread. So this is the retest, and this is how they respond. His disciples answered, but where in this remote place can anyone get enough bread to feed them? Jesus, don't be crazy. Nobody could do this. Jesus, not even you could do this. They failed the retest. Jesus sets them up with the same scenario, all the same details, and somehow they totally miss it. Now, if you're Jesus, this is when you'd fire your disciples, right? It's like, I'm taking applications for 5 new guys, all right? Peter, Andrew, I hope you guys still have that boat because we're done here. But that's not what Jesus does. With extraordinary patience, he repeats the miracle in almost exactly the same way. It's like, guys, go see what food there is. They bring back 7 loaves. He sits the people down. He does this multiplication miracle, and he passes out the food. And as the story wraps up, we get this. The people ate and were satisfied. Afterward, the disciples picked up 7 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. And this story is often called the feeding of the 4,000. Now, question you might be asking, should be asking, is how in the world, honestly, how in the world could the disciples have missed this? It's like the same exact scenario. And if you witness somebody multiply bread and fish enough for 5,000 people, you don't forget that. It's like, oh, how did we forget? No, you don't. So how in the world you wouldn't have missed this? How could they possibly have missed this? I have a theory. It has everything to do with where this miracle takes place. Because the feeding of the 5,000 in Mark 6, that happens in Jewish territory on the north side of the Sea of Galilee. This story happens in the Decapolis, which is non-Jewish territory. This is where the Gentiles live. These people aren't ethnically Jewish. They don't worship the God of Israel. They eat pork. This is them. This is the other people. And if you would have asked the disciples, because they're all Jewish, Jesus is Jewish, if you would have asked them, hey, who is Jesus? I think they would have said, he's our Messiah. He's the one that God sent to rescue us. And the very idea that they're spending so much time over in the Decapolis, I think they're going like, what are we even doing here? And the notion that Jesus would want to provide for them, it's like, what? You see, there's something that the disciples are missing about Jesus, something about him that they're not seeing clearly. And this is it. He came to provide for them too. He came for them too. The disciples were missing this, and I wonder if you're missing it too. The people in your life that believe very differently from you, he came for them too. People in your life that look different from you, that live differently, live by a different moral code than you do. He came for them too. People in your life that vote differently than you, that have a very different vision of the future of this country from you. Jesus came for them too. You see, I think part of what Jesus is doing in this moment is he's trying to expand the hearts of his disciples to more accurately reflect his heart for all people. This reality that he has compassion on them, that he wants to provide for them, that he's inviting them to follow too. I believe that God desired to do this in the hearts of his disciples, and I believe he desires to do it in the hearts of us as his followers now, to expand our hearts to reflect his heart for all people. And so I want you to do something this week. I need you to do something this week. When you pass that person in the hallway, I need you to remind yourself, them too. And when you're driving through your neighborhood and you pass that house that still has that political sign up, and it's for the other party, you know what I'm saying? I need you to remind yourself, them too. And when you're scrolling through Facebook on your phone and you see that post that you just totally disagree with, I need you to remind yourself, the person that posted that, them too. Because Jesus is revealing to his disciples and revealing to us as his followers that he didn't just come for me, he didn't just come for us, he came for them too. His desire is to invite the outsider in. So Jesus is taking his disciples to school. He's the master teacher. And he's revealing to them who he is. He wants them to see him clearly. Unfortunately, they have failed the test, and they have also failed the retest. And so now we come to part 2, the review. And so what happens here is that Jesus and his disciples, they get in a boat, they leave the Decapolis region, and they're headed back to the Jewish side of the Sea of Galilee. And there's this conversation that happens in the boat that starts like this. Be careful, Jesus warned them. Watch out for the yeast of the Pharisees and that of Herod. Now, if you do the reading this week in the journal, and I hope that you do, you'll notice that the story that we just covered, the feeding of the 4,000, and then this moment in the boat, this conversation, there's an interaction between them, between Jesus and the Pharisees, where the Pharisees ask Jesus to prove himself. Hey, perform a miracle to show us, and Jesus is like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. And then he warns his disciples about the yeast of the Pharisees, which is kind of a weird thing to say, but I believe he's talking about the influence. Beware of the influence of these guys whose hearts are so hard that they're just totally unwilling to hear what I have to say, totally unwilling to objectively see me. Their hearts are so hard. Watch out for their influence in your lives. That's what Jesus says to his disciples. Now, the disciples hear the word yeast, and they think about something totally different. Their minds go straight to bread. And so here's what they say. They discussed this with one another and said, it's because we have no bread. It's like, oh, shoot. We only brought 1 loaf of bread. And there's 13 of us in the boat. Like, that's not enough. What are we going to eat? And so, again, they're totally missing it. And if you're thinking like, whoa, wait a second. Like, after the feeding of the 5,000, and the feeding of the 5,000 or the 4,000, and now this moment in the boat, they're still not under. Yeah, no, you're thinking the right way. And so Jesus, I think he's incredibly frustrated. I think he's really disappointed. I think he's exhausted with this deal of his disciples just not getting it and not seeing him. And so he begins to ask them a series of questions. He says, why are you talking about having no bread? Really? Really? Why are we still talking about this? Do you not see or understand? Are your hearts hardened? It's like, you guys too? Watch out for the Pharisees. Is that you too? Are your hearts so hard that you don't understand what's going on here? And he says, do you have eyes but fail to see? Are you blind here? And do you have ears but fail to hear? Have you heard nothing that I've been teaching you? And don't you remember when I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000 people, how many basketfuls did you pick up? And they're like, 12. And when I broke the 7 loaves for 4,000 people, how many basketfuls of pieces did you pick up? 7. It's like, guys, I provided for all of them, and there were leftovers. And he wraps up and he goes, do you still not understand? As I read this, I hear Jesus in this frustrated, exhausted, like, come on, guys. Really? I think at this point, he wants for them to be understanding so much more. He wants to be expanding their hearts for other people, for outsiders, and they're still not understanding that they can trust him. And it's interesting because they have all the details of the story right. It's like, well, there was 5,000 people, and then there was 5 loaves, and then there's 12 left over. There was the 4,000 people, and then there was the 7 loaves and 7 baskets left over. They got all the details right, but they're missing the meaning behind those details. They're missing the person behind those details. And I think it's easy for us to just sit here and go, good night, these guys are so dull. But you know what? I think we do the same thing. We get all the details right and we miss the meaning. It's like, remember when COVID first hit? Everything's shutting down. It's like things were so tight financially. Are we going to get through this? Thank goodness for that stimulus check, right? Saved the day. And we got all the details right, and we miss the meaning. We miss the one who provides, who takes care of us. You see, this moment in the boat, I think this is a conversation about trust. And I think what Jesus is trying to say to his disciples is, look, you can trust me here in the boat because of what I did on the shore. Don't you see it? You can trust me here because of what I did there and what I did there. You can trust me now because of what I did then. You see, there's this connection between our ability to trust Jesus in this moment and our willingness to remember what he has done in the past. And so let me ask you a question. What are you dealing with right now? I mean, where are you finding it difficult to trust God? What are you facing right now? It's like if we get shut down again, I mean, I don't know if our business is going to make it. I don't know if we're going to be able to pay our mortgage. We could lose our house if I get laid off again. And those of you who are parents, it's like, okay, schools are going virtual. How in the world am I going to get my kids through school and work from home and my husband work from home? This is going to be insane. I just wonder, where are you finding it difficult to trust God in this moment? And what I want to suggest to you is that your ability to trust in this moment is connected to your willingness or your ability to see and remember his presence and provision in the past. Let me give you a phrase that might be worth writing down that I think kind of wraps up this story. I can trust him now because he provided for me then. You can trust him in the boat because of what he did on the shore. I can trust him now because he provided for me then. There's something that you might need to do this week, and that is remember. I'm just saying it might be a really good idea to grab your journal, grab a pad of paper, a pen, and sit down and just make a list. And just remember the ways that God has shown up, the ways that he's provided, the people that he's brought into your life, the ways that he's taken care of you over the last days, weeks, months, or even years. And depending on what you're going through, you might come up with nothing for a few minutes. I get that, but push through and make a list. It's not going to change your situation, but it could restore your soul, and it could empower you to trust in this moment, because remembering builds trust, and our ability to trust God in this moment is connected to our ability to remember his presence and provision in the past. And yeah, I just recognize as we talk about this that some of us are just feeling really disappointed. Because this season, it's been hard. And you wouldn't describe this season as your best season of trusting God. There's been some decisions, there's some things that you've done, there's some stuff that you went back to, not your best season of trust. And you just feel disappointed about that. Well, I just want to remind you that you're not alone. The disciples at this point, they're 0 for 3. They failed the retest and the test and the review. And I think what happens next, you'll find both challenging but also encouraging. And so Jesus and the disciples, they're back headed toward Bethsaida. So we got a map here. They're back in Jewish territory on the north side of the Sea of Galilee, and there's this interaction that takes place here. By the way, this is part 3, if you're taking notes, called the object lesson. I skipped that, so write that down. Okay, so they came to Bethsaida, and some people brought a blind man and begged Jesus to touch him. And so what happens is he took the blind man by the hand and led him outside the village. Now, this is important for understanding this story. Jesus takes this blind man that some people have brought to him, and he leads them outside of the village. Why would he do that? Away from the crowd. I think it's because the specific audience for this miracle is the disciples. This moment is an object lesson for the disciples. And so what Jesus does, he takes this guy away from the village in front of the disciples, and he does something really, really strange. He spits on the guy. It's like, Jesus, that's not cool. He spits on the guy. Now, why would he do that? Just understand that in that time, in that culture, some people viewed saliva as having medicinal quality. And you might be totally grossed out. But here's what I find fascinating and kind of comforting about this story, in context with the other miracles that Jesus performs, is that Jesus, the different miracles that he performs, they're often different in the way that he does them. It's like sometimes he touches somebody, sometimes he just says a thing, sometimes he's like, just go home, they're already healed, and other times he uses saliva and puts it on their eyes. And what I take away from this is that it seems that Jesus tailors his miracles toward what the people need or what the audience needs. It's like he does kind of custom work. And so why in the world would he put saliva on a dude's face? I think there was something about this that was good for this individual or perhaps helpful for the disciples. So later on today, when you're just going, why would he spit on a guy? There's at least a theory. So he does this, and then he's like, how's your vision? And the guy's like, can I be honest? Not great. Kind of blurry. I mean, I see some shapes. This is what he actually says. When he had spit on the man's eyes and put his hands on him, Jesus asked, do you see anything? He looked up and said, I see people. They look like trees walking around. This is funny, right? But it's like a partial miracle. It doesn't fully work, and I'm going like, Jesus, what's up with this? Like, were you tired? I mean, did you say the wrong words? What happens? But phase 2 kicks in. Here we go, next verse. Once more, Jesus put his hands on the man's eyes. Then his eyes were opened. His sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. Phase 2, Jesus heals this guy completely, and where his sight was blurry, now it comes into focus. This is a weird story, right? He spits on the guy, and then it's like a partial miracle. Question, why didn't it work? Why like the two-phase miracle? Again, Jesus just kind of did it wrong or didn't get enough sleep. I mean, what's up with this? Well, Jesus is God. He's all-powerful, and he doesn't make mistakes. And so I think this was intentional. And so why would Jesus do a two-phase miracle intentionally, where the first time it kind of didn't work? This is an object lesson for the disciples. He's trying to teach his disciples something through this miracle. The miracle itself is a parable, if you will. And so what is it that he's trying to get his disciples to see? Do you remember that conversation in the boat? Where it's like Jesus is exhausted and heartbroken over his disciples just not getting it. And he says these words. He says, do you have eyes but fail to see? And do you have ears but fail to hear? And would you believe that there's a story that takes place just before the material we've been looking at today, where some people bring to Jesus a guy who can't hear. Jesus puts saliva on the guy, leads him out away from the crowd, a miracle just for the disciples, and heals them. There's something interesting going on here. You have these two miracles, one before everything we've been looking at, where they brought to him a man who was deaf, and then one after the feeding of the 4,000 and the conversation in the boat, where he heals the blind man, and then sandwiched in between them in the boat, you have these, do you have eyes but fail to see, and do you have ears but fail to hear? This is an object lesson, and I think this is it right here. The blind guy, disciples, that's you. Disciples, understand you aren't seeing me clearly. You're only seeing me partially. The object lesson for the disciples is that's you. And Jesus is going to have to open their eyes again and again and again. Their vision of him is blurry. And part of their journey with him is that Jesus is going to bring their vision of him into focus. But it's progressive. It's gradual, just like the miracle. Phase 1, a lot of trees. Phase 2, clarity. Same thing with the disciples, and the same thing with us as his followers. I love this story. And here's why. Because when we fail to see Jesus clearly, when our vision of him is blurry, and we struggle to trust him, he challenges us, he corrects us, but he never abandons us. He continues to reveal himself and invite us to follow once again. And so I just ask you, how's your vision of Jesus? And an honest answer is blurry. It's not perfectly clear. But Jesus continues to reveal himself and invite us to follow. And part of this journey through this gospel, as we study the company of Christ, is that Jesus would more and more come into focus. And the message of this miracle, I think, is so good. And I wonder if you need to hear it. Because for you, maybe this is just not been your best season of trust. And I want you to hear the voice of your Lord challenging you, correcting you, but inviting you to follow. Revealing himself and inviting you to follow. Listen, I don't know what you're facing right now. Confusing decisions ahead. Perhaps just feels like an avalanche of anxiety around these COVID numbers and perhaps the political situation. I don't know if there's a relationship in your life that's just blowing up. I don't know what confusing, difficult situation you're facing where you're finding it difficult to trust. But I do know that the best advice I can give you is to focus on Jesus. See him, Hear from him. Bring him into focus in your life. Remember his faithfulness and provision in your past. See him clearly and trust him fully. And so, gracious God, we just pray that you would open our eyes. We need you to bring Jesus into focus for us so that we can trust you. And God, I just lift up our brothers and sisters who are facing confusing, challenging, difficult situations. God, would you bring them clarity? Would you bring them peace? Would you remind them of your consistent faithfulness in their past? And God, would you use us to extend your love and grace to others? This is what we desire. God, we love you. We're so grateful for your Son. And we pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Aaron, thanks so much for leading us this weekend. And I hope that you all were as encouraged and challenged and motivated as I was. And we have a great week ahead of us, and I hope that you are blessed, and I hope that you become a blessing to those around you. And before we go, I just want to let you know that your church is here for you. We would love to pray for you, and if you have a need, you can head to our digital bulletin at adabible.info and click on the tab that says Contact Us. We would love to pray for you. I hope you have a great week, and we will see you right here next week.